Okay, we're back, and we are continuing. We just did Keith Tippett Group, 1968, released 1970. Yeah, profound. Hit me like a bag of hammers. So yeah, we're continuing on with the Canterbury scene. As you see from the title, we are going to go into Centipede. And this is going to be another mind-altering performance, I believe. Definitely something. Another thing that Keith Tippett sort of brought into the music sphere. I appreciate you being here. Yeah, we're going to talk. I have to list off, as I always do, I list off some of the musicians in the group that we're going to be hearing. And this time it's probably going to take me like 5 minutes just to list off the musicians because there's so many on this. But I'll try to read through them really fast. So again, this channel, Subterranean Visions, what I'm here to do is explore through the vast amount of music in this world. Explore through music, dig deep, dive deep into the music, get more of the history behind it, get into more of the players, the history, the overlap of music from players at the time, who was listening to who was influenced by who, some analysis of the music itself, the performance, the audio, how it was recorded, anything like that. So I'm just kind of looking into everything of a particular music that I'm listening to. And yeah, we're doing full albums. We're doing recommendations once a month. So I'm going to take some of the best of your recommendations. And then, yeah, I'm going to do some marathons and themed stuff like this. So really looking into Canterbury scene music or any genre really across the board. World music, blues, funk, progressive rock, new wave, electronica, whatever. I'm kind of into most of it, and definitely trying to explore, hear new stuff, and hopefully you're here also to hear new stuff and find out new things and contribute. And it's a space for that, just communication, just sharing. We don't have time individually to find everything, so it's a team effort. And you guys have given me so much good stuff. I hope I've given you here, played some stuff for you guys, and definitely had some good comments from some of you guys saying, I've never heard this stuff before. So that makes it all worthwhile for me. So I really do appreciate it. And that's all I want this to be. Just a really good exploration into music that we've had, and not lose it through the history. Let's keep it vibrant for people. Anyway, that being said, what are we doing? We're doing Canterbury. We're doing the Canterbury scene. And we're doing we're good ways through. We're into 1971. We're doing 1963 to 1975. And I think we're at least halfway through. I'd say we're a little over halfway through. So we're going to do the band Centipede, originated by Keith Tippett on piano. And he brought together, I believe, a lot of members from Nucleus, from Soft Machine, from basically everybody in the sort of rock, jazz, fusion at the time. So Keith Tippett on piano. On saxophones, we had Elton Dean, Ian MacDonald, Dudu Pukwana, Jan Steele, Brian Smith, Gary Window, Larry Stabbins, Alan Skidmore, Carl Jenkins, John Williams. Also Dave White on saxophone and clarinet. On cornet, Ian Card, Mark Cherig, Mongeza Feza, Mick Collins, Pete Parks, and that was on trumpet and pocket cornet. Nick Evans, Paul Rutherford, Dave Amos, Dave Perrottet on trombone. Julie Tippett, Mike Pato, Maggie Nichols, Zoot Money, Boz Burrow on vocals, and Brian Godding on guitar. Roy Babington, Jeff Klein, Harry Miller, Dave Markey, Jill Lyons, and Brian Belshaw on bass, and Robert Wyatt, John Marshall, and Tony Fennell on drums. So that was more or less, I think, most of the people that I saw. And yeah, we're going to do just one piece. There's only 4 songs on this album, and they're pretty long. So I'm going to do one song on this album. And the album called Septober Energy. I'm going to do part 2. And yeah, this came out, I believe, in 1971, called Septober Energy. Here we go. Are you ready for it? I don't know if I am. Let's see. It's long. Septober Energy, Part 2. Here we go. was just thinking it'd be so awesome if someone, not me, but if I could do it, I would do a video of this song and then just pop in the names of the people when they're playing, with their saxophone. Yeah, the only one you can know who it is Keith Tippett on piano, and then I guess is Brian Godding the only guitar player, so I guess that's him on guitar. But everybody else, you guys can probably hear, and you can associate some of the sounds of the players. Perhaps the drummer, you might be like, yeah, I know that's Robert Wire, that's John Marshall. Saxophones, and likewise, I'm sure you guys can become ability to identify some of the players that they're playing. But it would be really cool just to have the names up there, especially just recently. So I heard two drummers. I'm like, oh, okay, now we got someone playing basic, someone's going crazy on the cymbals. So yeah, everything so far, it's definitely listenable. Like, it's already 7 minutes in, and I feel like, yeah, it's so interesting. It is laid out. There's enough personality, there's enough style of playing, the performance, particular. The different players have different sounds, so it really does feel like this, just really interesting jam. But it sounds like it sounds like there are people that the framework is there. The framework is there. Everyone feels like it's comfortable. They're not just hearing it for the first time. But anyway, yeah, I'm not sure who else is playing. It's going to be playing now on saxophone. If Elton Dean or Ian McDonald had already played bass, I'm not sure who was doing it. That's Roy Babington, Jeff Klein, Brian Belshaw. And the vocals was really interesting too. I don't know any of the vocalists' names on this album. I did just look up, Brian Godding, and also Brian Belshaw on bass. They were both from Blossom Toes, which I have no knowledge of. I have not looked into them yet. I may have to certainly. I'll definitely put their name on a list to listen to, because it sounds like they were, kind of earlier contributors of sort of this rock jazz mix, that we're hearing. So, and again, yeah, this was gathered in November of 1970. So, as I just finished at the end of the Tippett video, 1970 was Soft Machine 3, actually Nucleus, Elastic Rock, Soft Machine, the third album, King Crimson, Wake Up Poseidon, King Crimson, Lizard, basically was released in December 1970. So include Centipede, formed and recorded in the end of 1970, right after Lizard. So yeah, immense amount of music coming out in that year for these players. Keith Tippett, spurring that on. Anyway, let's get back to it. Yeah, again, I'm not going to know who's playing any of this, but so far, enjoying all the different styles and sounds of each player. They have very distinct playing styles for sure, and sound. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to pause it for a second there. So that last part, man, that really, I was trying to see when this came out, but I don't know the vocalists. They do sound familiar. But it really, I just, you guys know, I just listened to Gentle Giant Acquiring the Taste for the first time, a few weeks ago or a month ago or more. But that last part of the vocals sounded a lot like one of those songs. I think it's the first song on the second side of Gentle Giant. The melody and the vocal styles themselves and just the timbre of it, everything, that sounded so much like Gentle Giant on that album. So I think Gentle Giant did come out in 1971. Acquiring the Taste in mid-1971. This one came out, I believe, later in the year. Let me see, hold on. When the heck did this come out? 1971. November 1970, and it was released. So I'm not sure. Maybe it really doesn't line up time-wise. But yeah, it sounded a lot like Gentle Giant right there. Okay, so yeah, and so far some stuff from there. The guitar player solo, I don't know what he was doing with the sound. He had kind of a stereo echo, kind of slight delay maybe on it, and different sound. That sounded awesome. I don't think I've ever heard that before. So I'm definitely interested. I'm going to listen to that. But yeah, his solo, whatever. It sounded kind of like somebody. It sounded like me, when I was trying to play jazz tonality, jazz phrasing, when I really didn't know any of the foundational things to do. So you're just kind of trying to make sounds that don't sound right. Anyway, so yeah, not too much. In the beginning, I liked what he was doing a little bit here and there, but it was just kind of spotty, like off and on. Like maybe he fits here, maybe here he's just kind of, I don't know. I don't know anything about him. I don't know this style. Definitely was doing some stuff. It was kind of like trying to be maybe outside the box, be more avant-garde for that particular. Maybe it's safer to do that because you're already going to sound kind of out of whack a little bit to most people. So why not just go head first into it, perhaps. So yeah, everything's and it's interesting. 12 minutes in, and I want to hear where they're going to go with it. I think overall the thing that's kind of a little bit disappointing out of the whole arrangement. I know it's like complicated doing a 20-piece with all these people, but I mean they're pretty much just soloing. I think all the individual players, I feel like they could easily just, with this chord progression, it's a very simple chord progression. There's not much to it at all, and I feel like it's most noticeable with the bass player, right? The bass players are just kind of playing on the root notes. They're not doing that much stuff outside of the box. They're not, playing different harmonies. They're not playing off the beat. They're just pretty much staying right on the chord progression, right on the roots. So just to keep everything stable. Really, with what they're doing, like the solo players, they could probably just hop in and feel the vibe and just sort of solo off of that. So it's not too difficult to do that, I feel like, for all the players. For some, obviously, there's more arrangements for the vocals and different parts here and there. But yeah, so I would say that, for what the bass is doing, it's a little simplistic and it doesn't really add to sort of lifting this music off the ground a little bit more. I feel like if the bass and the drums were doing a little bit more, this thing would really be floating and really be flying. So it feels a little sluggish for what they're doing, but everybody else is sort of keeping it interesting. So. But let's see where they're going now. Interested here. We're halfway through. That's a different place. I love the trombone, the bubbling trombone. All the trombones getting to shine there. Great beat. 6/8.
moment for the end to begin again.
Wow. That was... Oh, wow, that was insane. That was so good. I couldn't pause it in there. Yeah, that would be sacrilegious to pause it in there. I was trying to find the lyrics on there. So, Septober Energy Part 2. Slowly the sunrise to warm my brow, fading the shadow remaining now, drying the storm that sleep has made, I awake. Fire of the morning shall ride the wind, carry the warning for all mankind. Only the blessed shall know the sign, they will shine. Take away everything that we own. We can even live without a home. Have all the money is your goal, but you'll never touch our soul. The wind is swirling the leaves, and heat of the morning sun is causing the grass and wood to burn away. Everything, the fire is killing off all we see throughout the land, good and bad. Yeah, that one was amazing. So, did that start halfway through? Yeah, I don't know. I would have maybe even cut that in half into 2 songs. I don't know, some of these things, but I don't know. They add as reasons to add these into these sort of full length sections, but it just feels like that one could easily been 2 pieces. Starting with those trombones just rumbling and having that area and building into that last just amazing like waterfall of sound. And honestly, I started to, as I'm listening to it, I'm looking up because I realize it does sound, I was looking up to see when Pharoah Sanders, when his albums had come out, because so it's 1970, he had just come out with Deaf, Dumb, and Blind, Sumon, Bokman, Umyon, which if you've heard that, they have a extremely long, extended piece similar to this. I think probably even longer, maybe the size of the whole album, but as far as the whole piece itself maintaining this sort of level, this sort of momentum throughout, it's a good, it's extremely, maybe up to 20 minutes. But it kind of reminded me of that a little bit, just as far as having an extended piece, with this beat. Obviously they went into and did the vocal part. They sort of had these sort of parts where they focused more on, the horns and then the vocals, and then bring in, the piano with Keith Tippett sort of coming in with the piano. So they kind of fluctuated a little bit back and forth, which made it, it was just amazing. Honestly, I'm gonna for sure dig deeper into this piece and maybe even listen to this again in another space, maybe in my car or something where I can really get the surround. But yeah, this is an amazing piece. I'm surprised. I was definitely worried about, this album, listening to this album, because of its, the scope of it, the players, and I was curious in the beginning, first half of the song, like how much of this was written out. It seemed like it could have been just written out because it was a really easy framework, chord progression wise. And I feel like, they could, all the players are good enough. They could easily, improvise over these changes. They just need to know when to come in, who's next, and sort of, pop on, off and on with that. Not too bad. But with this part of the piece, having all these players at once, keeping this huge machine rolling, it's just immense, and then mixing it, because I'm sure they had to do this in a room. They didn't have everybody separated. So I'm sure nowadays, if they would maybe try to separate, the vocals, where they could sort of really, mixing this part would be so gigantic, but at the same time, so worthwhile. Like, I feel like you needed a little bit more control over all the pieces coming in. So, but as the piece of a whole, it sounds fantastic. It would be wonderful to hear an alternative mixes of this, where you can kind of hear different placement, in the field, in the music field, as far as the instruments. This one, everything is just sort of right on top of you, all expansive, but it would be interesting to hear like a version where stuff is panned a little bit more. You hear the vocals sort of popping over here, and this, it could be really, really just immense, amazing. So, yeah, so much. This just, glory, just wonderful, beautiful, powerful piece. This second part for me, I'm definitely gonna have to listen to it again. And it'd be really awesome to hear this mixed, where you can kind of hear things a little bit more isolated. But it's always half dozen of one. You want to, if we did that way, you'd want to hear it a little bit meshed. There's a million ways you could do it. But Robert Fripp took on the producing, of this particular album as payback for Tippett, playing on the Wake Up Poseidon and Lizard and Islands. And all the avant-garde bands have one thing in common: an unwillingness to accept traditional boundaries within musical styles, to exclude certain forms as wrong, as one would expect from the avant-garde. Their musical philosophies are bound up in a fierce desire to capture the nowness of now, rather than return to the comforts of history or the false tenacities of high art. There is no pure musical mind anymore. This sense of endless input from all sources underlies the work of the best experimental possibilities. Music that looks outward than inwards to self-referential possibilities. That's interesting, yeah. Looks outward rather than inwards to self-referential possibilities. That is interesting, yeah. Music and musicians, everyone looks in. It's much harder to look out and feel that sort of standing on, you're not standing on stable ground, as much, unless you're used to it. Anyway, but yeah, so as of November of 1970, gathered from Soft Machine, King Crimson, and Nucleus, and then I think the guitar player and another of the vocalists were from this group Blossom Toes, so I'm going to have to look into them a little bit. But obviously, yeah, some different musicians, a lot of musicians on this, 50 pieces, I think they said. So the album gathered, almost universal hostile reviews, and buyers were disappointed that Fripp was merely producer and that the unwieldy band had already broken up. That was from Tom Callahan. Yeah, I can see it's a difficult album to listen to. I think if they broke it up into smaller chunks, it may have had a little bit more reasonable people just, liking portions of it and not liking other parts. Yeah, and I think it wasn't meant to be, they didn't spend a ton of time, orchestrating it and making it the perfect album. So it's a loose, I'm sure it was done somewhat in a loose regard. As Robert Wyatt stated in 1971, January, funnily enough, this is where categories break down, because it's almost like for the first time I've had to be a rock drummer. It's the first time my primary function has been to lay it down so that as much as my role permitted, everybody knew where things were, what was going on, what the dynamics in the field were. A functional role to a degree I've never had before. In fact, until this year, I've never worked with other people's bands before. I've been spoiled very much. I've developed everything I've done either in playing in groups without leaders or groups where everybody had an equal say. Keith Tippett certainly didn't tell me what to do, but it seemed out of the first run-throughs the right approach to take in relation to what Brian and Tony Fennell were doing, and funny enough, it taught me about rock drumming, about that kind of functional drumming as opposed to counterpoint drumming. He said, Christ, I haven't played in 4/4 for about 2 years. So, yeah, it was interesting in that sense, the drumming, I'm sure, with the three drummers and sometimes playing together. So one significant aspect of Centipede is the participation of South African musicians, including sax player Dudu Pukwana, trumpet player Mongezi Feza, and bassist Harry Miller. Moving from their troubled homeland in the early 1960s, along with other great musicians such as pianist Chris McGregor and drummer Luis Maholo, they quickly became influential on the jazz scene in England. Tippett talked about them with great admiration. They were the first band I heard in London. I just couldn't believe my ears. There was Chris McGregor, who was white, and that was one reason they left South Africa, because they couldn't play together. They did, but you weren't allowed to play together, and you couldn't play to mixed audiences. Eventually, a year later, we became friends, and they liked my sextet. They all died. They never got home. They never saw Mandela leave prison. They never saw the end of apartheid. They couldn't go and visit their mom or dad because they may not get out again. All very, very sad and shocking when you look back on it. Shocking. And lastly, summarizing this amazingly productive period in his musical career, Keith Tippett said, "You must remember that the 70s was a very flourishing artistic time. There was so much going on. There was a gig every 2 days. London was culturally thriving right through from theater to contemporary visual arts. It was the extension of the swing 60s up until the mid-70s, and then the political climate changed, obviously affecting the artistic climate." So, yeah. That sort of sums it up in a nutshell. Yeah, the period of the time, but sometimes, the periods, the cultural climate, they can have a reaction from the music scene. Sometimes music is a reaction to what's going on also. It's not always but there is, as they said, when there's a flourishing, when artists are allowed to sort of branch out, it certainly can be contagious, along a bunch of different lines. So, yeah, really interesting. That's just one piece. That's just one out of 4 pieces on Centipede, Septober Energy. Came out in 1971. And again, yeah, I think the inclusion of that sort of, we certainly heard some African themes in that particular second half of that song. And I'm going to be doing an upcoming on some of the recommendations. I'm going to be doing a couple pieces from exploring Chris McGregor, the Brotherhood of Breath, or I believe. Yeah, and sounds amazing. I'm definitely going to look into that because I love some of that jazz influence and the African influence into jazz and other world music. So that's really exciting to hear that. Yeah, this is amazing, 1971, and how much the sort of Robert Fripp crazy with the African players and all the different players from the different groups, Nucleus, Soft Machine, Keith Tippett, Blossoming Toes. I'm sure there's a bunch of other musicians in there that were either just studio musicians or played in various, jazz or different outfits. So, yeah, really cool piece of the puzzle here. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I'll definitely be listening to the rest of Centipede after this, just to hear what else is going on. But I appreciate you guys being here, and yeah, as usual, come around again. We're going to be finishing off the Canterbury scene. We got a handful of bands left to do. I think 10 bands at least left to do, or more or less. Yeah, and we're going to be doing full albums. Please reach out with full albums recommendations to do, and as always, other recommendations, single recommendations, because I do listen to them all, and I put together once a month. I'm going to put together a medley, 5 or 6 or 7 of the best recommendations, and put all those out. And after that, yeah, the sky is clear, the sky is open. I'm ready to keep doing, I'm going to be putting out more genre-based, I think, medleys, marathons, things that we haven't done yet. They're blues, electronica, fusion, world music, punk. Yeah, we're going to jump into I'm going to do a bunch of different stuff. Again, I appreciate it. Come around for the next one, and you guys have a great day, and look forward to it. Take care. Bye-bye.